Hey, welcome to the BBA today. This is episode number 101. I am Ron Collins, the general manager of the Bikini Krill, and I have with me Kurt Imber, the general manager of the San Fernando Bears, and we are going to have a great time talking about all things Brewster as we roll into this. We're all waiting breathlessly for the first spring training sim of the year. It's that time of year. You can feel the hope and the dreams in the air. Kurt is living the dreams and the hopes of his brand new little one. Welcome back, Kurt. So glad everything went well for you. How are you doing today?
Hey, Ron. Really glad to be back. Happy that everybody's healthy and things went smoothly this week, and we're able to put aside a little bit of time to still chat about Brewster baseball. How
There
have you
you go.
been?
I've been doing really good. Really quite busy anticipating the media guide stuff again, so I'm doing some work on that, which always quiets me down a little bit on the boards. But hey, life is, everyone only gets 24 hours a day and all of that good stuff. But I've been very excited to get the wheels rolling again. We had, we've got some development lab stuff we can talk about. We had the big push on international free agency, which had some surprises in there. I don't know. I saw San Fernando picked up a player. Maybe you could talk a little bit about your center fielder that you picked up and what your thoughts were there. But to me, the big pictures are a couple of other teams also. Specifically, we have to talk about Las Vegas sometime here and the commissioner and his big splurge. So, talk to me about your center fielder. What I was in on the center fielder, but admittedly, I was limited. I knew most of the players I was going to bid on were going to get blown away. So, because I overspent last year.
Were you limited to like that weird specific number, 395,000 something something something?
Yeah, so I made a bunch of
Yeah.
395s, and I got one guy. We'll see if there's anything left in a couple of weeks. I may go back to the well, but I was expecting we wouldn't get anybody. So I'm just happy to get the one guy I got. But I liked the center fielder that you picked up. Talk to me about him a little bit.
Yeah, my approach usually is to try to spend around the limit in total. And early on in my time in the league, I would just go after one big fish and offer the max demand of 4,750,000 to that player. And I just found that didn't spread the risk enough because these guys are so high risk. So my approach the last few years has been to sort the list by relationship. I'm assuming the better relationships with the prospects give you a better chance at signing at a better price. I assume there's a relationship there. You probably know, Ron. So I had a very strong relationship with that guy and checked him out. I was trying to find some guys who could play a little bit of defense, and I ended up signing. I'll make sure I get his name right. Uh, I know his last name's like almost Mao because
Hmm.
in my head I kept calling him Chairman Mao. Um, and
Yep.
he could play some defense. So I picked up like four first basemen from the Robins over the offseason, and a lot of them were former IFA guys, and I just
Right.
kind of said, got to find some people who can actually play some defense, might develop into something. So Meow is like a 8 range center fielder, 9 outfield air, so clearly good foundation for defense, and then he's got some good power as well, especially gap power, which didn't really care about any particular tool. Just wanted somebody who could uh, have some upside, have some ceiling, could run a little bit. So there's just a bunch of blue bars. I don't know. I don't really overthink it with the IFAs. I like if they have some decent makeup, but like I said, I mostly just look at the relationship and make some offers and try to spread it around to 5 to 8 different players to fill the complex.
There you go. Yeah, I liked him because he's a guy who doesn't have any holes and he can do everything well. Um, so what that basically means, the downside for all IFA, and number one, I don't know about the relationship. It sounds proper, and I think about it that way too, but I don't know that that is true or not true. But it's fun. It's a fun way to break it. The thing that I like about, I look at every single IFA as if they are most likely a bust. And I think that's fair. Probably 70 to 80% are going to wind up being bust. At least 50 or 70% are going to wind up being bust. But mostly when I look at a guy like Meow, and why I liked him was that he runs well, he fields well, he hits well. And yes, I don't really care that much about which blue bars and things like that for IFAs because they've got a long development path to go through. But I liked him because, the upside, he doesn't need more than a bumper 3 to become a really solid player. And if he just manages to make it through, he's going to be useful. So, and really solid across the entire outfield. So I like that pick quite a bit. What did you think about Las Vegas? I did not, when the big spenders are talked about, I do not think about Las Vegas as jumping into the international free agent market at the level that the commissioner jumped in. But I think he spent upward of $20 million plus tax. And when I talked to him last week, when we did our episode, he was talking about how he was jumping in, but he didn't think his numbers were going to be big enough. So I don't know if he was just sandbagging me and sandbagging the league in that sense, or whether he, no, goodness sakes, I apologize, or whether he just underestimated the energy that was flowing in to IFA at this stage, or overestimated, whatever the right term is, So what were your thoughts when you saw what he picked up? 3 or 4 guys, all of them 6 and 7 million a piece or so. It's a bold move.
Yeah, man, but he said he's not going to be very active in free agency. You should, if you're he's probably maxed out on bonus funds, I'm guessing. So there's not really anywhere for him to hide more money at this point. He's going to be a high revenue team. Got a little playoff money last year. Like, you should spend your budget, I think, if you can't save up by building up your bonus funds. So if he's not going to sign free agents, and he's probably going to draft towards the back of the draft, and it's a little risky to count on getting expensive guys in the draft. Sometimes there are $7 million talents that slide till later, and that's a way to use up some of your excess cash. But sometimes several people are on auto pick, and they end up auto picking those guys by accident anyways. So jump in, spend the cash. It's a really risky investment, but it's better than not investing it. And so I was just surprised more people didn't like Matt said. I think he just thought more people were going to beat him to the punch. I'm surprised more teams didn't offer. There's still some pretty good talents out there. There's still a 65 potential player in the pool, and a bunch of guys who are 50. So I just thought with the reduced stadium fees and dev budget, that there'd be more money tossed around.
Yeah, and there has been quite a bit of money tossed around, but it hasn't been focused on individual players. You look at, I thought it was interesting when you look at the three main players that Vegas picked up. Right, number one, it's not too surprising to see what I'll call overspend. It was almost $7.5 million on a shortstop, which first off, he's an awfully good shortstop. He looks like an awfully good shortstop. His sidecar defensive ratings still need to grow, but he's obviously a kid, and you never know what's going to happen. So the upside to a shortstop, spending the money on a shortstop is always a valuable idea when you've got that kind of money. He also threw money into a starting pitcher, which is interesting. Not surprising. If you can find a top-notch starting pitcher, that money could pay for itself. If one of those two hits, that money is paid for itself. But the more interesting one is to throw even more money at top-level bullpen arm, which I think the world of the Brewster has gotten a little bit more comfortable with the idea that relief pitchers are maybe a little more valuable than they have been considered in the past. But anyway, that's just an aside. When you look at what Las Vegas spent their money on, shortstop, starting pitcher, elite closer, essentially, it also makes sense from an organizational standpoint. It's not like he threw all of his money into a big first baseman when we have lots of first basemen out there right now. He didn't pay $7 or $8 million for a first baseman.
Yeah.
So that
Cobble Hill
fits.
was just giving first baseman away this offseason, and Montreal's got about a dozen of them too. So
There you go.
agreed.
But other teams that made a bit of a splash. I don't know if you were paying attention. Austin has signed 3 or 4 guys for over the cap, which I thought was interesting, given that Chuck has been swinging and missing, I think, for a lot of the free agencies that he was looking at building with, or free agent targets that he was looking at building with. So it makes me wonder if he is following up on his decision or discussion about whether Austin's window to surge he may be putting the brakes on that run and kind of recalibrating back down into building the Shredders minor league system. Similarly, Cape Fear, I think, picked up a couple and are over cap. I'm interested. I'm looking at teams that are going over cap, right, over the tax limit. And
Yeah, the other one that I've been trying to weasel into this podcast, haven't found a reason to talk about them, but finally did, is Mexico City. They made the single biggest offer, or they had the single biggest signing. So they spent $8.6 million on a shortstop with 11 power, which makes you drool too.
That is completely true. And I don't know that he's a shortstop right now. He looks like a awfully solid second baseman, though. But regardless,
He's got a good tool.
What's that?
He's got good defensive tools. There's a base there, even if the range is a little lacking.
Right. He's got to grow. He's got to grow a little bit to be a shortstop. But obviously, again, these guys can grow. The thing you like about Karsten Papanikolaou, how do you pronounce that?
The Greek.
The Greek.
The Greek freak.
There you go. The 2 dogs.
2 dogs. Yeah, that's right.
The thing that I like about him the most is not just his 11 and 10 gap power, both of those are high, is that his raw rating on those is already a 2. So that means there's already a little bit of development going on, and I don't know exactly what that does to the raw percentages, but anytime you start at a little bit higher level, you've got a slightly better chance of getting through the development field. So I thought and it fits the conversation that I just had about throwing money into a shortstop is, high risk but very high reward. And a shortstop with 11 power is, I guess he could play shortstop with a 7 range and 11 power. If he's going to hit 65 home runs, he can probably play shortstop with a 7 range.
And then we've got 2 other teams over cap, it looks like, so far. And that is Boise and Phoenix. Phoenix just barely over, but Boise solidly over by a couple $1 million. But they spread their money around more on multiple players for the most part. So just a little bit higher spending level version of what I was describing earlier of spreading the risk a little bit.
Yeah, and Ben Teague in Boise is on a tear.
Yeah,
I'm not sure what Ben is doing as an overall plan, but it's fun to watch. He's making deals and he's signing players and he's doing IFAs. It's like money is growing on the potato vines out there. I don't know. So it'll be interesting to see what, as I put on either Discord or the forums, I can't remember which. Quite often, I will look at something that Ben does and scratch my head, and it's not so much that I worry that it's a bad idea or a good idea or whatever. It's just not something that I would conceive of. It's not my style or whatever. And but then half the time he shows up in the playoffs when I thought he wasn't going to make it. So not my style, but who's to say who's to say that's right or wrong? But Boise is not a team that I would have picked to be going above tax cap. Some of the teams I would have picked to be going above tax cap have not. I would have fully. I mean, I always expect Nashville is going to go over tax cap. I expect the guys like Charm City and maybe Sacramento to go over tax cap, but I know Ben Huring in Sacramento is kind of taking things in a different way, so that doesn't surprise me too much. Teams like Yellow Springs and Louisville, who threw away money last year past bonus cash, were dark horse candidates to me to go over a cap, but I don't think they have done that as of yet. When we'll see. Obviously, the IFA process is still going. So
there's enough talent out there still to easily go over the limit just by signing 4 of the better players left on the board.
Yeah, and all these teams
with extra money,
and all these teams with extra money should definitely spend, all of it on these high risk players without any question.
Now that I'm done, snap them all up. I hope there's bidding wars.
That's right. That's the thing. Once you're limited to $395,000 per bid, you just put in a few because it's kind of fun, and then you sit back and grab the popcorn and watch everyone else spend all of their fans' hard-earned cash, and see what happens. So anyway, there's that. Let me turn the conversation. I want to turn the conversation around the Hall of Fame. We're going to have we've just had Hall of Fame voting. Matt will be tabulating things, and when we put out the media guide, we're going to see who of this big class has made their way through. It's always controversial. Last time out, you asked me about Phil Cole, whether he had done enough to make the Hall of Fame. Earlier on, we had talked a little bit about the Hall of Fame. Let's open this up and let me ask you, of players who are currently playing right now, active players right now, who are guys that you point to and say, that is let's talk about guys who we think are Hall of Famers right now, and maybe into a few guys we can watch to see who might be on the bubble. And that's assuming that the small hall guys let him in. So, number one player right now you think is in the Hall of Fame, no question.
And I'm going to exclude guys like Juan Rivera and Minobu Shimizu, who are technically active players, but are done. I don't know. They're they might play AAA or in the GBC, but I don't think they're going back to the Brewster. I need to atone for last week when I couldn't remember his name. So Malik bin Mazen, for now the Rosenblatt Bombers. I think he's underrated. He's basically our Albert Pujols of our little sim universe, and just every year hits 60, 70 extra base hits with a high batting average. They can just count on him to just rack up a bunch of WAR in the middle of their lineup, but he hasn't had an amazing year in a few years, so he hasn't been winning awards, at least from my memory. But that guy has been in the Hall, I think, for several years now. He's kind of like Pujols, that by the time he turned 30, he'd already had such a solid stretch of excellence that he'd lock things up Koufax style for the Hall. and I think last year was a down year, and he was worth 5.7 WAR. So he'll probably keep doing it for a few more years, but I think he's a pretty easy lock at this point. A career 942 OPS, 147 OPS plus, just a monster. Just consistent excellence for 10 years now. Looks like he's averaged 6 or 7 WAR a year over that time frame.
Right.
And it's kind of crazy because he got traded earlier in his career. And the guy he was traded for is probably the other guy who I would first bring up in the conversation, Hector Cano Jr. Right now, they're separated by 4/10 of a WAR, of a win, I guess is the correct way to phrase that. So how cool is that these two guys who have this like interwoven story, they're both about the same age. They do things pretty differently. Ben Mazen is a first baseman, played a little third, but he's a corner guy, and Cano is still a pretty athletic center fielder. But they're neck and neck, just like right there in WAR. Mazen more consistent, Hector Cano Jr. more of highs and lows. With some injuries throughout his career. But those are the first two guys I look at, right at about 77 WAR, and that should make them shoe-ins already for the Hall.
Yeah, you would think so. And Ben Mazen is a particularly interesting case because I could see him performing at this level for another couple of years. At 35, if this were 8 years ago, what is it, 63? So it says 7 years ago when I was first coming back in, I would say this guy's going to be going to wind up with 120 WAR because at that stage, older players were hanging on into their early 40s sometimes, and Ben Mazen is 35. His ratings are pretty solid. He's led the league in doubles every year for 5 years, and 7. I'm looking at his numbers right now, and 7 of the last 9, right? So
I was way short on the extra base hits. I was just riffing there. You're right. He hits that many doubles every year.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, that he did dip to 5.7 WAR last year. So I guess I don't buy that he's really regressing much, and I think that that his profile is higher even than Hector Cano Jr.'s simply because he's been in the postseason with Rocky Mountain quite often. He's a 10 or 9-time All-Star, several-time Puckett. He's just more of on the cultural tip of the tongue. Hector Cano Jr. is also probably in, but he doesn't have quite the same. He would be on my ballot, I'll put it that way. But I don't know that he has the same kind of cultural capital as Ben Mazen does. So that will be an interesting vote to see. It's helpful that Cano Jr. is mostly a center fielder, so that puts him in a different light. My guy that I think is definitely in is also a Mexico City guy, Mexico City pitcher, Dave Corfield. I think he's up over 90 WAR right now, over 250 wins. Probably going to pitch for another year or 3. Should end up in the 260, 270 win range. I cannot imagine him not being put into the Hall.
Yeah, and he's a guy who's kind of had it locked up for a few years too. I think a little closer to the end of his career, probably as a 38-year-old. Looks like he's signed for 1 more year. I don't know if that's like an option or anything. I mean, right now Mexico City is happy to have him back. He just keeps chugging along. I'm assuming he's getting close to the end just because of his age, but he was once again worth 3.5 WAR last year and threw over 200 innings, just eating up a ton of innings for them.
Right.
Mexico City just kind of keeps chugging along. I think I keep waiting for them to sort of turn over and have a bunch of new faces, and every time you look down, there's still like this Hall of Fame lock on their roster. Roman is gone, but Corfield remains, and Corfield's been so durable that he just keeps stacking up the WAR and the innings onto his resume. He might even have a shot at 300 wins. I mean, it's an outside shot, but he's at 253 right now, so he needs 47 wins. He's been putting up around 15 wins a year most years. So 3 more years like that, and he'd do it. That'd be his age 38, 39, and 40 seasons. He's such a generational talent. Could happen.
Yeah, he is not the pitcher that he was, though. So I don't really see him doing 15 wins for 4 years or whatever.
Probably not. Yeah.
I mean,
Fun
if he were to make it that far, that would be a remarkable and fun story. But I think, you know, the bottom line is he'll be on my ballot whenever he's retired. I think he's a guy who can still pitch in the number 3 slot. You know, I don't think he's a ace. He's not a guy you roll out there as your stopper, but really interesting. Be interesting to see how he ends his career. And whether he ends it in Mexico City. I will, open disclosure, I have actively courted to see if I could trade for Dave Corfield, knowing where he was at. And so one of the aspects is I know he's got a no-trade contract, so he won't go to places. Anyway, there you go. Who are some other guys? I've got 3 other names on the tip of my tongue, 2 of whom I think are definitely on my ballot, though maybe not in, because I'm a bigger Hall guy than most. And then one that I believe is right on the edge of on my ballot, but is still quite young. So
Okay, we might have the same player in mind there. So there's 3 guys who jump out at me as just the numbers are already there. You don't even have to make like a Koufax argument for them or anything. And that's Sammy McNeil, shortstop. I like WAR. I like counting defense. I don't know why Hall of Fame should only be about hits or home runs or what have you. So that's like why I had no problem putting him right there with Ben Mazen, because he could still really pick it in center field, and McNeil was like that at shortstop. One thing I'll note about McNeil though is we're starting to maybe see the beginning of the end for Sammy McNeil. I was digging through the dev reports because I'm really bored when I'm holding a baby. And I noticed his infield range finally lumped to 8, which is a big moment for a shortstop when they cross back from 9 to 8. So
yeah,
McNeil might be moving to second sooner than later, but he can still get on base a little bit and steal bases and do some things. But he's cleared of the 70 WAR threshold, which usually is a lock, in my opinion, for the Hall. And I'll be a little faster with these other names, but then Wafid Bisher, the first baseman, who's also in Mexico City now. So Corfield will retire, and they'll still have a Hall of Fame lock on their roster. He's kind of like Ben Mazen in that, like, just puts up big numbers. He was a big name when he was in Nashville, and maybe it's just because I pay less attention to the Johnson League, but I feel like he's kind of more quietly going about his business these days in Mexico City. And then on the pitching side, I think Bernie Stewart is a pretty clear, just like lock for the Hall of Fame. Another guy who's still pitching really well, kind of like Corfield, but has accrued some pretty incredible numbers in his career. 233 wins. He's got a shot at being over 250, and I would think that's trending towards making you a Hall of Fame lock these days. And then the younger guy, I assume you were going to mention, who is in already, in my opinion, for Koufax reasons, is Hector Silva for Charm City.
Yeah,
I think he's been good enough for long enough now. If you're already at 50 WAR when you're 31 years old, you're in my book.
Yeah, the interesting question would be, you know, the future is never clear, and conversation does not bode particularly strong for a guy who is lights out in their 20s and then falls off a cliff and hangs on for another 7 years and plays, picks up a WAR or half a WAR for 6 or 7 years. To me, that's the only situation where Silva would have any real counter conversation, right? If he retires at age 37, but his ages 32 through 37 were essentially replacement, but he's living off of his name, then people are going to have a conversation, and then you start looking at WAR levels throughout a career. One of the reasons the Koufax argument works so well is Koufax was done, right?
Yeah.
He was done. If he would have hung around and just not been able to pitch, would his mystique be the same, right? Likewise, and not to, boy, I'm so worried to even voice this.
Yeah.
If Hector Silva were to have a horrible event occur to him and not be able to play anymore, would he be in? I think the answer might be yes. But if he were simply to have development hits and play for another 5 years and not gain any WAR, would he be in? That would be a different conversation, right? So I'm not sure he's quite made it if he keeps playing, but he's right at that edge. And he's been, the fact that he's been at the top of those fun, silly pitcher ranks since essentially the day we started them adds to his mystique. So I don't know, that'll be interesting. The difference between Wafid Bashir and Ben Mason is going to be an interesting one on the voters' side. I put Bashir in a middle zone for me right now because he's a first baseman. His numbers are gaudy. I'd love to have him on my team, but he doesn't have the 7 WARs in the long string of leading the league in doubles, and he led the league in triples for 3 years in Nashville, which is fascinating. Just fascinating. First baseman leading the league in triples. The speed is an interesting combination, right? But speed doesn't play really well to Hall of Fame voters. So I think he is on my list, but I would not bet the ranch that he's going to get in right now. Feels like it should be a lock, but there have been a lot of players who have gone through that I felt like were a lock that did not make it. So we'll see what happens. He is 35 also.
He's been lumping a little bit too. Looks like his days of hitting 40 home runs are past him.
Yeah, his raw power is down. Theoretically, knock on wood, he'll still be putting up 2 and 3 and 4 WAR a year for another 2 or 4 years, and so the raw WAR numbers will count positive to him. But I have, especially since I have come back, I have become much more cognizant of exactly how exacting the Hall of Fame voters are. Like I say, I'm 98% that he's on my list. But actually, with the other question is, who's he going to go onto the ballot with, right? Because to be blunt about it, I mean, I filled my Hall of Fame ballot out this year with my full 10, and I still had like 3 guys that I would love to have put on. So, that will be an interesting question too. So I'm going to be interested to see the way the community reacts to our Hall of Fame voting over the next several seasons, because we have a large group of very good players coming through that are on the back end of that great glut of aged wonders that are now toward the end of aging out. And you can see it on our rosters, because our rosters are quite young these days.
Yeah, and I mean, we have like from one big haul guy to another relatively big haul guy. We have like 15 players, right, who we think should get in on the current ballot, at least 10. And that's before these guys who I was talking about earlier who are just like hanging out on free agency. Like Juan Rivera is going to join this ballot pretty soon. Shimuzu, Robert Menzies, Ernest McBride. That's just position players.
Yeah, Menzies and McBride are going to be interesting cases, by the way, in my mind, because neither one of them have. Well, Menzies has a pretty good high profile because Nathan helped publicize him. McBride finished his career in Brooklyn, and so he did not have some of the media ink that some of the others might have. So that'll be an interesting case.
He hit 758 home runs. I really hope there's no discussion to be had about Ernest McBride making the Hall of Fame, but you're probably right. Unbelievable.
There you go. And I mean, home runs are not the only thing in the world, but obviously those are counting stats are great stories. So
Easiest shorthand for sure. I think 70 WAR and above is pretty much a lock, and I don't really think too much harder about them at that point. And then I'm open to some debate 60 plus, between 60 and 70. And then if you're under 60, it's a pretty unique situation where you're a relief pitcher or you're, the, God forbid, Hector Silva situation we discussed earlier or something like that.
Right.
I don't overthink it too much beyond that. I love the details and the awards and the individual seasons and the way it felt and everything, but that's my guidepost at least.
Right, without a doubt. Anyway, well, so we got all sorts of things that the BBA is just bursting with all sorts of things going on right now. So other things that we were talking about beforehand, you've got a list of some good things to chat through. We've got a development lab. We've got, I think there have been some questions about reliever conversions that we could talk about. I know there was, who was it? Was it Ben Boise? Somebody did a reliever conversion they were quite happy with. There's some question as to whether that's still a valid, useful participation point reward or not. What do you want to talk about next? Let's move off of the Hall of Fame.
I've got something hot off the presses because James just blessed my math on it. So the compensation should get posted pretty soon, and everybody we'll link to the Google sheet, and everybody should check my work because this is a hobby after all, and I did my best. But if there's anything anybody catches with it, happy to be corrected on it. But it looks like we're gonna have 5 comp picks this year. You had one of them for John Brown, right? John Brown, is that his name? Yep. He's type B. I feel kind of bad for you. The way the math works on starting pitchers is kind of a really high threshold in my opinion, and then the other ones seem easier to hit. Like Brown is a good starting pitcher, I think. Oh, yeah. He feels type A to me, but
well, there's been a long surge to try to break down comp picks. So it's gotten to the point where it's, to me, kind of just a random. It's almost a random kind of thing. It used to be that you could actually use
feelings versus math, right? Like
yeah.
You have to define it. There has to be some formula, but then you do the math and you're like, well, that doesn't match up with my feelings.
Yeah. So, and even beyond that, it used to be back in the day, you could, as a general manager, you could attempt to use signing a player as a default. If nothing else, you could default and say, if I can't trade them, I'll at least generate a comp pick. But you can't do that anymore, which is fine. To me, it's a shame because it removes a tool from the general manager's toolbox. But I know a lot of people don't like that general manager's toolbox tool, so now it's much more complex, right? You can't make the math before you sign the contracts. You have no idea whether somebody's going to qualify because it's a 2-year process now. So first and foremost, as you're going to go through, and I'm interested in the other guys, but let me make a comment about your work, yours and James's work. in doing the math and maintaining that data. It is not it's not like absolute rocket science, but it is not a absolutely simple slam dunk procedure. I appreciate both of you for doing that work, because those are the things that make this league what it is. So number one, before you go any further, thank you. And number two, don't let your head get too big. Let's go through the rest of the players.
When I have the time, I enjoy it. Sometimes it feels like I got home from work and I'm still doing spreadsheets, but especially right now while I'm on like my paternity leave, James was like, "You're supposed to be resting and hanging with your baby." I'm like, "I am, but I need something to pass the time." Um, and and then I wanted to respond to what you said. I don't think anybody's ever going to be happy with the rules because there's so many little like exceptions and
Oh
edge
yeah.
cases and things with comps, so it's tough. Like I really like that playoff teams don't get it. I think that makes sense to me, but I do think it stinks. Like a team can like kind of, if you're close to the playoffs, then you're worried that you're not gonna get it.
Yeah.
It's tough to thread the needle,
Well,
right?
and
Like,
this is
oh,
this
I
is
backed into the playoffs and won 80 games, and now I don't get comp. But
yeah.
like other years, some team does
Yeah.
that won.
This is the
Yeah,
BBA. There will never be any rule that 100% of the people like. We attract too many eccentric and energized and charged general managers to ever find something that works for everybody. So,
yeah.
anyway, I agree with you.
All right. So there's two other teams that got comp, and I'm one of them. I will say this: me and the other team who got the comp, I do kind of like that we were both teams that were like trying to win last year and came up short. So this kind of feels like it's our consolation prize for not getting into the playoff money. Is at least we get these pretty mediocre like second round comp picks. But Mexico City gets two Type B, so second round comp picks. One for their departed catcher, Abid Kakaho.
Sounds good to me.
And then one for their departed third baseman, second baseman, Zifu Huang. Um, and then I actually, when I ran the math, I double checked it. I actually get a Type A for Bill Irvine, second baseman, who was only worth 1.8 WAR last year, but he was a 3 to 3.5 WAR machine in Calgary, and the A is just based on your 2 year average. So his average was 2.6, which was right at the threshold. So I'll get a Type A for him, and then a Type B for Richard Bullock, who Alan and I had a conversation on the boards about him because he's like this 5.55 lefty pitcher who's just kind of been a swing man who I actually kind of intentionally stopped giving starts to last year because I saw that he might be eligible for reliever conversion. And I was kind of like, if I have to put some crappy starter out there, I might as well avoid Bullock and keep him comp eligible as a reliever. But he was worth 1.1 WAR on average over the last 2 years, and the reliever threshold was 0.75. So I get Type B for him, and Alan's comment was just he doesn't feel like a comp player, and I totally agree with Alan. I was surprised he was the only reliever that made it because that threshold is so low for relievers. But a lot of the best ones were from playoff teams, so they
Yeah.
weren't eligible. So that's the list. There will be 4 extra picks, sandwich picks they're called sometimes, at the end
Right.
of the second round, and there'll be 1 at the end of the first round.
There you go. That's good to know. That's helpful.
And then the main other topic I feel like, Ron, is just like you said at the beginning. We're here. It's spring training. So time for some spring cleaning of the rosters. We put together our spring rosters up to 70 players. I've done polls a couple times over the years to see how many players people put on their rosters because I always find that interesting. I
Right.
think you're like me where you index more. I think are you a full 70 guy or you just fill it out?
Yeah, I try to do 70 pretty much all the time. I um, I personally I start with all the players that I know I'm going to try to use in the first week, and try to get time in the first week. And if I've got position learnings and things like that, I want to get in. So my first week is always 99%. You can guarantee that you're going to see all of my A and double A and so forth prospects playing, mostly because I want to get them some time, and second off to protect my starters from an injury standpoint. And then I will go in and throw in extra players just to have them around. I know that the game will pick them out and play them for a few at-bats or a few innings or whatever, completely with the idea that it can't hurt to get young guys an opportunity to sit in the same place with the major league coaching staff. I completely openly state I have no idea whether that makes any difference whatsoever, but it makes me happy.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so I do that, and who knows, it might. I can't find any way to test that, or nobody is out there saying this is 100% the thing. Then the second week I am basically in transition, and I'm cycling in my planned everyday players to see, to try to get them some reps and get them over the rust thing, and then by the last sim, probably 80% of the playing time is my standard starters. I have no idea. I was actually chatting with Ben, I think, on Ben Teague, Boise Ben, not Sacramento Ben. About whether that's helpful or not. I've had 2 years ago, my team came out of the gate in April and just crashed, right? The year before that, it was a hot April. I have no idea whether that playing cycle helps my team in April, but I will say that it seems to do a pretty good job of protecting guys from big injuries. Seems to. I don't know there's any way that you can guarantee that you can keep your guys from getting hurt. But those are all of my thoughts. That's why I do it. Is that why? Do you have other thoughts on? I know you're a big, put a lot of players into spring training also. Do you have other thoughts as to why you do that, or?
I've been convinced, and I get this from like my offline games as much as I have in the BBA, but it seems like players' ratings, if they're gonna change, solidify. Like if you have fringe minor league contract guys who you're looking at making the roster, it seems like their ratings will swing a lot in the spring if they play in the spring versus if they just sit in AAA where you don't see game results. So I've just felt like anyone who has any shot of playing on your roster this year should be in your camp so that you can try to get the clearest picture of their dev ratings heading into opening day. And whether that's science or not, I don't totally know. I think they ended up with like 62 guys. I just couldn't find any more players that I realistically thought could ever play for me this year.
Right.
But same general idea as you. And this is the first year where I'm going into the player strategies and just benching some of my top position players. Because in the past, I've not put them on the depth chart, and then the like AI manager still just they'd still have like the most plate appearances from the sim because they would just put Yu Suzuki into the game. Don't blame them, but I'm just not letting them have that option this time around.
Yeah.
So I think just like the guys who are like 28 plus and established, just have them bench. But pitchers, so do you hold back your starters as well? Because I've been of the mindset that I want to build up their pitches. So I usually do like 35, 55, 75 or so with the pitch count.
Yeah, that's probably not a bad idea. I do have a tendency to hold back my pitchers also.
Somebody's going to blow out their arm in
Yeah,
that first training sim, and it won't be you if you're holding your pitchers back. So you have that going for you.
yeah, there you go. Yeah, I mean, these are the kinds of things that make me love playing the game because I don't know
Mhm.
what the right answer is, right? And I try. I mean, there have been times where I've gone ahead and started my pitchers and not done pitch counts. I don't worry so much about pitch counts in spring training. It hadn't thought really struck me to make low pitch counts, mostly because my frame of reference is that the general manager or the manager is not going to pitch them more than 2 innings the first cycle anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you were to drop it down to like 15 pitches, then that would pretty much guarantee, just a brief um, rust shake, essentially. That might be an interesting way to go. Because you're right, even if you just have them on the roster and you've got them in an unspecified kind of a thing, if you don't bench them, then your manager will use them throughout the spring, which is the magic sauce to all the players that I pull in but don't put on the starting, in the depth chart. I know that all of my piddly little prospects are going to get some time, and um, I like your thought. I like your learning your point of view on um, kind of those middling guys as to whether they will see their ratings move more during spring training. It makes logical sense that you would, from a developer standpoint, from a out of the park developer standpoint. That would be a kind of feature that I could see them putting in, but I don't know that that's true or not. But it's kind of cool.
It's just like you were saying earlier, it just feels right. That's kind of like what major league teams are doing in the spring, right? They're just kind of running those guys out there. They want to get a look at them.
Right.
Does the 36-year-old guy still have his fastball? Can the old center fielder still cover ground out there? So I just kind of feel like it's the equivalent of that.
Right. But usually I'm not actually looking for a position competition, although this year is a unique thing for me because I'm trying to figure out what to do with my center fielder. Ramon Sains is my 20-year-old rookie or prospect who might become a rookie. He'll be back in the dev lab to see if he can get his glove up a notch. But in the meantime, I've got what I consider to be at the stage a short-term center fielder that I went out and grabbed from free agency. So essentially, those two will be in quotes competing. But we'll see what happens. Most likely, Sains will be down in the minors right now again, since I've got was it Abdul Halim?
It was a nice pickup, by the way. Nice low risk, moderate contract. I don't even need center fielders, and I was submitting a cheap offer to him. Just was like, I'm not letting somebody else get this guy for $3 million a year or something. And
Well, there you go.
you put in just the right amount.
There you go. Alrighty. Well, I think we've been beating the heck out of stuff around the BBA. I think we only got like half or a third of the way through the list of all the things we could have talked about. But it's probably a good idea to make this the end point and see if we can get something out here as we all anticipate watching our guys play in spring training. Any last any last parting comments you wanted to make?
No, I'm just looking forward to everybody's spring positional competitions. We want a good, clean fight between the competitors. Keep signing those IFAs. Spend all your cash so that uh, you don't have any later in the year, please. And don't worry too much about the preseason predictions yet. There's no way the game knows what your roster is going to be or how you're going to set it, and teams are still adding players from their minors and all kinds of stuff. But obviously, the one that it does generate before the sim is extremely important, and you should make all of your decisions off the one right before today.
There you go. And I will say, as I've been digging into the media guide previews, I am really looking forward to this year. I think it's going to be a really competitive year, and so everything that all the other teams can do to make mistakes would be really appreciated.
Yeah, me too.
All
It's a
right.
it's a good looking environment this year for sure.
There you go. Alrighty, Kurt. Well, you have a fantastic afternoon. Dig through the spring training sim as you are as you're holding on to your newest little one, and we'll look forward to chatting again next week.
Sounds good. See you guys on the boards and the Discord server.
All righty. Have a great day. Bye.